So at this point in time, I want us to shift our attention to offenses against liberty. And this is covered under section 254 to 266 of the Penal Code. Now, offenses against liberty protect a person's freedom of movement and personal liberty. They include kidnapping, they include abduction, they include wrongful confinement, and unlawful compulsory labor. Now, slavery-related offenses have now been repealed. Now, the first offense against liberty is kidnapping. Now, kidnapping involves taking or carrying a person away without consent or without lawful authority or beyond territorial limits like beyond Kenya or from lawful guardianship. Now, there are various forms of kidnapping. The first form of kidnapping is kidnapping from Kenya. This is covered under section 254 and 257 of the Penal Code, and this simply refers to taking a person outside Kenya without consent. The punishment for this offense is 7 years imprisonment. The second form of kidnapping is kidnapping from lawful guardianship, covered under section 255 and 257 of the Penal Code, and it simply refers to taking a male of under 14 years or a female of under 16 years or a person of unsound mind without the consent of the guardian or the parent. The third form of kidnapping is kidnapping for specific purposes. Now, I want you to consider, for example, a section of whatever I've discussed, the purpose and the sentence. If you look at section 258 of the Penal Code, the purpose of this particular offense could be murder or danger of murder, and the sentence is 10 years. If you look at section 259 of the Penal Code, the purpose of this offense could be secret confinement, and the sentence is 7 years imprisonment. If you look at section 266 of the Penal Code, the purpose of this particular offense could be grievous harm or slavery, and the sentence is 10 years. If you look at section 262 of the Penal Code, the purpose of this particular offense could be grievous harm or slavery, and the penalty is 10 years. If you look at section 262 of the Penal Code, the purpose of this particular offense could be theft from child, and the penalty is 7 years imprisonment. Now, another form of kidnapping is concealing a kidnapped person, and this is covered under section 261 of the Penal Code, and this is simply knowing a person is kidnapped and you conceal or detain that particular person, so that the punishment is the same as that of a principal offense. Now, let's look at the elements of kidnapping. Now, the actus rea of kidnapping involves taking or carrying away a person by force or by fraud without consent of the parent or guardian and without lawful excuse. And the main three of kidnapping include, intention to kill, intention to confine, intention to cause grievous harm, and intention to enslave or intention to steal from the victim. If you look at the case of Republic Njoki, son of Mulunda, that is Republic versus Njoki, son of Mulunda of 1946, the facts of this particular case were that the accused detained a woman in the bush after attempting sexual intercourse, preventing the woman from leaving. And so the issue was whether the detention amounted to abduction or kidnapping. And the rule is that abduction occurs where a person is forcibly or deceitfully taken or detained without prohibited intent. And the application is that the accused, restrained the victim and prevented her movement, showing intent to cause a sexual offense. And the conclusion of this particular case was that the conviction for abduction was actually upheld. If you look at the case of Peter Mwao Kamia versus Republic of 2016, the facts of this particular case were that the accused allegedly induced the complainant to stay at his house after taking her items. And the issue was whether force or deceit was proved. And the rule is that abduction requires force or deceit inducing movement. And the application of the case was that the court found that the complainant stayed voluntarily and evidence of inducement was weak. And so the conclusion of the case was that the conviction was quashed. Another offense against liberty is abduction, as covered under Section 256 of the Penal Code. And abduction occurs where a person, by force, compels or by deceit induces another person to move from any place. So that the key point here is that abduction is not a standalone offense. It becomes criminal when it is linked to intent under murder, under confinement, under grievous harm, under slavery, and under theft from child. If you look at the case of Republic versus Njoki, son of Mulanda of 1946, the facts of this particular case were that the accused detained a woman and prevented her from leaving, and she refused sexual advances. And so the issue was whether detention or movement is required for abduction. And the rule is that abduction includes both moving or restraining a victim with prohibited intent. And the application of this case was that the accused prevented, freedom of movement and acted with intent to commit sexual offense. And the conclusion of this case was that the conviction was actually upheld. Another offense against liberty is wrongful confinement, and this is covered under Section 263 of the Penal Code. And wrongful confinement is simply unlawfully restraining a person's liberty already in a place without removing them. And the punishment is 1 year imprisonment or a fine. The key elements of wrongful confinement include total restraint of liberty, and secondly, it includes, no lawful justification, and thirdly, that the victim is already present. So no movement is actually required. If you look at the case of Republic versus Sefusaid of 1964, the fact of this case was that the accused detained the complainant without lawful authority. And so the issue was whether physical enclosure is required. And the rule is that wrongful confinement is total and lawful restraint, not necessarily in a building. And so the application of this case was that the victim's liberty was fully restricted. And the conclusion was that the conviction was actually upheld. We also have the case of Lemni Aaron versus Republic of 1977. And the facts of this particular case were that the accused handcuffed and detained, the complainant unlawfully. And the issue was whether restraint amounted to wrongful confinement. And the rule is that moral or physical restraint without lawful authority constitutes confinement. And the application was that the accused used force and threats to restrict liberty. And the conclusion was that the conviction was actually upheld. Another offense against liberty is unlawful compulsory labor, and this is covered under Section 266 of the Penal Code. And unlawful compulsory labor is compelling a person to work unlawfully and against their will. Now, there are key elements of compulsory labor, and they include compulsion to labor, they include absence of consent, they include use of force or threat, and also unlawfulness. If you look at the case of Republic versus Ndosi and 6 others, the facts of this particular case were that the accused forced complainants to work under threats, and the issue was whether force or threats must be proved. And the rule is that compulsory labor requires proof of coercion, and the application was that evidence showed threats were used to force labor, and the conclusion was that the conviction was actually upheld. Now, the general principles of offenses against liberty are several, and one of them is that the mens rea of intention, cuts across liberty offenses, so that we have intention to confine, intention to cause harm, intention to exploit, intention to deprive liberty. And the actus rea involves movement without consent, where we have, kidnapping or abduction, and also detention without movement, where we have confinement and forced labor or compulsory labor. Now, the distinction among the offenses we have just discussed, includes the following. We have the offense and we have the core feature. The first offense was kidnapping, and the core feature is taking away the victim. The second offense was abduction, and it is forcing or deceiving movement. The fourth one was confinement, and it is simply restricting liberty in place. And the last one was forced labor, and the core feature is compelling work. So that is all I have concerning offenses against liberty. If it is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and to follow this channel for more legal lessons.